Please ensure that you are watching this episode in HD resolution and full screen, otherwise many of the details will not be visible. The most commonly accepted meaning of the word Hyperborea is the legendary motherland of the Slavic people. But in the light of the new findings of Anatoly Fomenko, who shows good reason that we need to redefine the very term Slavic, and then Hyperborea automatically becomes even more elusive, because Slavic seems to overlap with Goths, Celts, and various others ancient people. On the top of that, it becomes even more confusing when we found very ancient European style artifacts all over America, North and South America. Actually, it turns out that we say Slavic people, but we have almost no clue what does that mean. And this confusion is confirmed by the artifacts and the old books. For example, we find that very same Hyperborea under a different name, but same description in the Vedic literature of India under the name Meru. And even in the so-called ancient Greek mythology, there are these magical beings that can fly in the air, and they live in this Hyperborea, which is north, in the north, whatever that means. As we covered already, the people of Russia started figuring out that the Quackademia is telling them bedtime stories instead of real history, and they took to the fields to find their history by themselves, and they found a lot. They found Cyclopean megaliths at places where no civilization should have existed if those bedtime stories were true. Some of those findings are covered in the video about the Ural megaliths, and also here and there, as I found new stuff, I included it in the previous episodes of The Survivors. A lot of stuff I haven't even mentioned yet. For example, the stone spheres, perfect stone spheres, some of them look as if they're natural. It doesn't mean that they are natural if they look natural. Others resemble the Truvant stones of Romania, the live-growing stones with families that I also mentioned earlier in the Baalbek video. And yet others bear clear marks that they have been cast out of geopolymer. Some are made of a couple of layers of different materials. And in another group of these spheres, unexpected objects are found inside, like for example, shark teeth. Siberia is not the only place where such stone spheres have been found. Other locations are Costa Rica, New Zealand, and the Bosnian Pyramid. And people noticed other interesting things again in the north. This hill barely looks special, but this is what they found when they took an aerial photograph of it. And then this young Russian man, instead of spending his vacation drinking vodka, he thought, wow, there could be more meaningful things in life. Let's go to Ural and see the things with my own eyes. He found many sites looking very similar to this. Now officially this is just a pile of natural stone that the glaciers have been dragging across the valleys and mountains and have deposited it here somehow in a magical way, and there has been no civilization in these frozen places ever. But then how come the stones are not rounded by all this dragging? They appear freshly chopped up. And on the top of that, they are concentrated only at one place. They are not scattered through the valley. This is not any bottom of a valley or anything like that. It's a mountain slope. Honestly, this looks more like a similar site in Georgia that's not in Ural, but it looks very similar. The only difference is that this time the structure has not been fully demolished, and somewhere in the lower layers one can still see the remains of the megaliths. This is the historic site Shaori in Georgia. Now we are back to Ural. Again, pay attention to the sharp edges of the stones. These are not stones that had been dragged for thousands of kilometers by glaciers for many thousands of years. And then the young man noticed these strange lines. The white line, do you see that goes across the stone? And it's not just a line, it goes across the full stone in a plane, a perfectly flat plane. Well, that also maybe could be natural, but then when they noticed other parallel lines, and not only lines, but full planes that are absolutely parallel to each other and grow across the full stone, they started realizing that this stone may not be completely natural. And then they spotted a third line, a third plane, again, perfectly parallel to the others and at the same distance. At places, the bedrock appears to be cut, and cut with great precision. The surface is absolutely smooth, really perfectly smooth, not like our stone quarries. It is very important to notice that the stones that were part of a bigger single stone lay next to each other after they have been broken into pieces. Look at this, and the examples of this are endless during this video. This is an absolute solid proof that these stones have not been dragged by any glaciers. These stones are here because something with tremendous force broke into pieces the structure that existed here before. Perfectly polished walls. Again, do we see those straight lines or not? I'm not sure if that's what we see. It could be. And then stones with a peculiar pattern. If you look at this separately, one would definitely say, yes, natural formation. And indeed, natural looking stones are spotted here and there. This is not a sensational discovery. And there are quite few here, but the strange thing is that they appear to be very thin, evenly spaced layers. At this point, I can't say for sure if these multi-layered stones can have something to do with geopolymer casting, but what we can say for sure is that around lay many stones with one side cut, clearly being cut, and very smooth, as if polished. So we clearly see signs that this could have been intelligently made structure at one point. But even if we assume that it was some sort of natural formation, still the open question remains, what kind of force could have turned it into rubble? This is what we see on the old maps in terms of a legendary old continent in the north, and remains of tropical plants are being found. There has been a continent there once upon a time, but modern academics tend to send it millions of years in the past. Then how did the cartographers know about it? Medieval cartographers, not clear. This is probably a more realistic old map. It was taken from a history book or textbook. In Germany, somebody in communist times went to Germany and quickly managed to take only photograph of this, and after that could not return. The world was quite divided in those times, and now we cannot trace from which book was this photograph taken? If somebody can help identifying the book, it will be greatly appreciated. But the important thing is that this is a historic map and we see a man hunting over there in Hyperborea. So probably it wasn't that cold at that time. I mean, the historic time depicted, not the time when the map was made. And here it comes, extremely interesting connection. One of the targets in my first remote viewing project were spirals, some of them made of exotic materials like tungsten, and they are found in very ancient earth layers. Some of these layers date, according to official dating, hundreds of thousands of years ago, minimum, maximum millions of years ago. Now, one of the remote viewers who participated, and by far the best one, was Mike Hubbard from the Arvari Remote Viewing Academy, a remote viewer with 15 years of experience. Now, he saw the targets very well. This is what he submitted under absolutely blind conditions. So blind that I had the numbers of the targets written only on a sheet of paper and not even on my computer, because our computers are not private places anymore. So he definitely saw the coils very well, and the thing is that the ones I set as a target were from the region of Ural, and then as a surprise he gave me this feedback for the full region. He didn't know where the target is located. He also submitted fairly good descriptions of the other targets, so he's a definitely trustworthy remote viewer. And this is the surprise. This is what he says about the area where the coils were found. And on the top of everything, he wasn't even familiar with my Survivor series. I got connected with him and invited him to participate in the project because I was looking for experienced remote viewers. I begged him to participate actually. He was not aware of my work. I was really pinching myself when I started reading this. Target has a distinct sense of two major epochs. In one, the entire area is covered in sand and huge sheets of ice. The frozen, icy area is most prominent. Most of the forests and vegetation died quickly, and much of the architecture was ruined. The mountain features are also covered with ice. The other epoch has a milder climate, but is still relatively cold and windy. This time period has a large population with commerce and maritime activity. Wow, milder climate in Siberia, huge population, developed commerce and maritime activity, and then the architecture is ruined quickly together with the vegetation. This sounds like the stuff I was suggesting in the mammoth episode. And then on the top of this writing, the other part, visual of a comet, that could be the destruction that ruined quickly the vegetation and the architecture. Huge devastating cyclones or hurricanes, refugees, small groups of people journeying to escape, strange animals, mammoths or mastodons were once present here. Well, it all makes sense. Now I understand why they are finding that few hundred years ago grapes were growing in relatively cold regions of Russia where they don't grow nowadays. Not exactly in Siberia, but somewhere slightly below it. So if Siberia was cool and windy a few hundred years ago, then the grapes would have been growing somewhat south of it. Fossilized tropical forest found in Arctic Norway. Well, this is just one of the current discoveries. There are many, many like that. The layers of mammoths mixed with the vegetation, all in a horrible porridge, at some places reaches the thickness of 70 meters. Everything just got scrambled, devastated very quickly. No wonder that these are the only leftovers of the architecture now. And then a viewer sent me this quote from an amazing book. Yet once again, I can confirm that within the past centuries, the archaeologists, they were better informed than now, and the valuable founds are gradually buried and obscured by the current history fiction polishers who want to make their bedtime stories sparkle. They polish them so nicely to look academic. Sorry, academic. So here we see elephants, France, England, North America. So if Hyperborea was here, then it is near not only to what is nowadays Russia, but it is also near to nowadays American Alaska and parts of Canada. Well, are people even searching here in these areas? That's what I asked myself, and with the help of our beloved Google Earth, I found more than I expected. First of all, starting somewhere here, most of the coastline is intelligently manipulated. I'm gonna show you that in detail very shortly, reaching somewhere here, even and possibly much further. This is a protective wall so that the violent waves of the ocean don't break your ships or your home on the beach or whatever. This is, I'm tempted to say man-made, but I would say only intelligently made. For sure, and elegantly and beautifully. But I'm having a strong doubt that this is modern, although I'm really not familiar with the history, the official history of this. But I seriously doubt it's modern because who would construct anything along many thousands of kilometers? That would be extremely costly to protect what? Absolutely and totally uninhabited area. Yes, people built similar things on a very small scale to protect their yacht and ships, that they do. But over here, where there is no population or it is extremely scarce, I don't think they built. If it was only one, only here, yes, I would say these people built it. But this is a construction on a grand scale and it is partially submerged. This is intelligent design, but it is partially submerged. So other thing that that was coming to my mind is that if this was, let's say, recent, doesn't matter if they claim or not that it is recent, but if it is, then it should have been built fairly recently, because just few hundred years ago, this would be unimaginably difficult. Probably it would be impossible even with modern means. Look at these elegant lines, and this is many thousands of kilometers. This is a construction on a grand scale. If it was built recently, we would hear about it and it would be maintained. It would be made in such a way at least to last, I don't know, 100 years or something, or 200, but that is not at all the case. It is partially submerged. Here somebody is using it, but I don't think these are the original builders here. So a lot of it is submerged, so it is not maintained. That is another sign that this is not a modern project. Here parts are missing. When I said that it is probably impossible to build it even nowadays, I meant it from economic point of view. I'm really not sure about that. I will appreciate the feedback from you in this respect. All this is just a hypothesis for now. It is not something that I have established. This episode is a bit different from the others. It is only a hypothesis in a very early stage. This is such a grand project. Here we see small parts of it, and here. And most importantly, it seems to be designed for a lower level of the world oceans. And by the way, same type of old earth ruins. I consider this to be part and parcel of the old earth ruins. Look at this beauty. Look at this beauty. But it's scale, sheer scale. This is huge. I mean, this is a small population. Have they built all this? Even this small portion? I sincerely doubt. So here we see the rectangular lakes. So what I was saying is that the canals in Florida that I have discussed already a few times, and also California, they are also designed for a slightly lower ocean level. And they appear to be part of the same system. Now this is very prominent in this area. It continues all the way here. Now here it starts vanishing. That also makes me think it's not very recent, because it would make sense that the lower we go, the more we would see of it, because there is more population here than here. But no, here it vanishes to appear here and there again. So all these sports here that some people are trying to gift to some unknown civilization, local, very much local, are the very same civilization that built the same things here. And also all of the area of Japan and all that, and even we saw it in the episode of St. Petersburg. It's also over there. Absolutely same style, identical, as if the same engineer made it all over. It continues, it covers probably most, or at least a lot of the Mexican coast here, and it's visible even at places in South America. You can go yourself on Google Maps or Google Earth. In this particular segment we see various rectangular structures, some of them clearly partially submerged, and segments like this are a proof to me that there is a good chance that this is indeed, all this wall is a historic one, and one designed for lower ocean levels. And then this mysterious line, is this a canal or what? It is definitely intelligent design, but it goes from nowhere to nowhere, goes across flowing rivers without a bridge, so it really seems to be historic, this line. And yet below it we're gonna see modern infrastructure, partially maybe related to an old earth dam. Very weird, very, very weird. They look quite natural, but this is 32 meters. So although it looks like a dry cracked soil, I haven't seen any such cracks and peels of such proportions. And it's really thousands of square kilometers covered with this. So what are these cells? Definitely not a modern infrastructure, because that means that very recently millions of people should have lived here, or at least many hundreds of thousands. It is this grid of these cells covers large parts of northern Canada and US. They look like fields. Everything covered with this grid. Now the cell size would be some 10 meters. Like this. This is 10 meters. But then what's this? Yeah, this could look like some sort of remains of a modern something. But then what's this? Is it the ruins of the building? that was originally next to this, I don't know, swimming pool or fishing pond, or this was and when. Complete mystery. Looks like this was an intact line before this lake appeared here, so it could be old. Again, hundreds if not thousands of rectangular lakes. The remains of maybe harbors. Typical entrance for the harbor. There is modern infrastructure here, there is something. If it was only one place and not thousands of kilometers long, I would agree that probably these people made this. But it's all along the coastline. Full of partially submerged harbor. Definitely we see right angles here, but the sea level must have been lower when it was originally made. Some right angles still sticking out. Very little left of this. Preserved example of protective wall. Of course, the rectangularly shaped lakes continue everywhere. This is not recent, definitely. Lakes, I mean, and this too, although here it is preserved, there is no modern infrastructure here around. Here it is preserved. It continues all along the coastal line. Obviously, entries, remains of harbor probably. Elegant entrances, right angles, everywhere. Again, an elegant entrance. Goes forever and forever. Actually, maybe on 2 layers of it. It's a perfect capture of the functions of these things. You see the waves? It stops them. It's peaceful inside. That's why they have built it. Again, the protective line is very elegant. No infrastructure anywhere around. Modern, I mean. But there was an old settlement here, or old something. They also liked to stay near the shore, very much like us. We tend to build big cities near the shore. As it goes inland, they get less and less, this rectangular shape. And here we have a rectangular something in another rectangular something, the bigger one. The elegance and precision of these earthworks never stops astonishing me. This half of this bow would be some 20 kilometers actual length, and it is so precise. So this is what our forefathers could do. So what are we doing on this spot? All we can do is edit the maps, in this case Google Maps, to obliterate their work. or at least parts of it. It is partially visible. And the silly thing is that their earthworks, which is a gigantic amount of work, is much more precise and elegant than our Photoshop work next to it. Look at our curved lines. We're so pathetic. We can't make it so elegant even with a brush on a computer program. So we have an outer protective wall, a bigger one, and then a smaller one here. Such walls definitely don't grow on trees, especially at the places where rivers meet the sea. The narrow passage, parallel lines. No infrastructure anywhere around, modern one I mean. Most definitely nothing. Then in the vicinity, a protective dam. I really wonder what is this material and what is this? Very strange. No remains of modern infrastructure anywhere around. Beautiful lines. And the people are missing altogether. Anywhere around. Starting from the unknown something is a line. What is this line anyway? And the line leads, this is definitely somewhere. Not a sign of modern infrastructure, but partially submerged things. Too many right angles. Something, definitely. Something, but without somebody. Something that misses somebody. Definitely an intelligent design with entry. So the water levels were lower, but not much lower, apparently, at that time. The agricultural fields, or whatever they are, partially submerged. Yet another proof that they are not recent. The Eskimos are not growing bananas here. And again, we have one second protective wall, elegant with entries. Very elegant. Now, this is definitely intelligent design, not only here, but also here we have straight angles. And then here we have straight angles, something like around here. Straight, so rectangular. And then it looks so trashed, everything. Were there buildings here? God knows. So looks as if some sort of gigantic cosmic metal brush scraped the earth. These horizontal lines, they are from the image editing. It means they have something to hide here. It continues here as well. Winds. This is not work of the winds. Metal winds. The brush was going in swirls here. Well, I'm trying to think of some sort of geological scenario that would produce this effect. Okay, it could be done by the wind, and the stone would erode in this fashion because that's how it is structured, somehow in this direction, when it was still molten lava. Again, right angles. Was this also in the molten lava? And these were definitely rectangular shaped things, obviously, once upon a time. This one as well, and this one, and most likely all of them. So I'm continuing with my geological scenario. Okay, the direction changes here and there because the lava solidifies. But then what about this? Really, they look like a cuts. And exactly when we have these interesting things, always severe photoshopping on the top. What a nice circle stuff in the middle of nowhere. And just for contrast, this is how a real natural coastal line looks like. An identical style, older ruins, are noticed in the Russian Hyperborea. We have allowed to be plunged in such a deep ignorance in terms of history that now we are in a very silly predicament. For example, as if somebody who has two bolts and half a wheel and then tries to recreate how this machine looked like. Well, that's very difficult, but still I'm gonna try without any guarantee that this will be the truth. It's gonna be based on everything we have covered so far in the full Survivor series, and on the set material as well, and also on a channeled material that is found in a book called The History of the Soul, and that channeled material also stands some chance to be genuine. I wouldn't put it on the same level as the set material, but it does give some hope. And also it is based on the remote viewing from the Arvari Remote Viewing Academy I mentioned earlier. So Atlantis vanished, sunk underwater some 26,000 years ago after being suddenly shaken by extremely violent earthquakes. And then another catastrophe some 11,000 years ago did not wipe that many people because the population was relatively small, but changed radically the climate of the planet. It is not clear at all at which point the continent that was located on what now we call North Pole sunk underwater, but the adjacent regions currently found in Northern Europe, Asia, and North America still had a relatively milder compared to now climate up to very recent times. They got covered in ice probably just some few hundred years ago, and that explains that tragedy with the mammoths and also the traces of elephants and other warm-loving animals in France, England, and so on, found in relatively recent historic layers. Probably the last remnants of advanced knowledge from Atlantis were preserved in somewhat better form in the Nordic regions, not exclusively, but at least one of the main places, Egypt being another, for example. The main drawback of this hypothesis is that the older the ruins seem to be spread all over the earth, not only in the Nordic regions, especially in places that are now desert. They were overgrown with lush greenery not so far away in the past, and then all of a sudden always some miracle happened and it turned into desert in no time, and often under very mysterious circumstances. But there are possible explanations for this. First of all, what I call old earth ruins, may not be remnants of one single civilization. There could be a couple of them involved in creating all this, and we simply cannot discern at this point which part belongs to whom. Another very good possibility is that the so-called gods that were visiting various uncivilized tribes were not so much from heaven, but had very much terrestrial origins and were members of this advanced civilization that had outposts all over the world, since it had no problem flying all over the place, quickly and efficiently. Although, having said that, please don't take it to mean that I endorse the idea that there are no amazing entities coming from other locations in the universe and from other dimensions, visiting us all the time and communicating with some of us. I don't think so. I'm only saying that some of those mysterious for some people beings could have had terrestrial origin. And if we have to summarize everything in an even shorter form, I think the words of Seth are the best way to do it. He says, "There were a number of advanced civilizations on your earth in the past, some of them spoken of in your legends and some not." Well, great, that's great news. There were some that we don't even have legends about. And not only we suffer of extreme scarcity of reliable historical information on which to build true history, what is even more amazing that the information about the current state of our planet, its current look, is also not available. We pay billions to fund costly projects that will go to Mars and take detailed photographs of it, and at the same time very few of us notice that we don't get those images for our own planet. Pay attention to the stunning quality of the images from Mars, let alone the small pebbles. In this particular photograph, you can even see the dust particles on Mars. This hole is of something like 1 centimeter diameter, if I remember correct, but the gray stuff is dust. And I am going into this again because even after the last episode of Antarctica, I still receive emails. People are telling me, don't you worry, you don't get images of the poles because nobody has made such, nobody ever needed them. Really, I mean, can adult people say such thing? How can you say that nobody needs them? What about the intensive poisoning of the full North Pole region and all these Nordic seas by the oil companies? There is a heavy industry there. They need resources, they need pictures so that they can go and rape Mother Nature over there in the most efficient and fast way. And what do the honest taxpayers who finance all these supposedly satellites that are taking countless photographs every minute, every second for the benefit of humanity, what do the taxpayers get? They get this. Yes, large parts of the Nordic regions are still absolutely without any satellite image at all. I specifically checked all the providers of maps that I could find. This is all that they can offer to us in terms of information. Or because colorful stuff distracts children and dumb people easier, they also make this type of computer graphics. They don't even claim that this is an image of the Earth. This is a computer graphic, and a bad one. Look, when they were pasting the clouds, they just hired cheap labor. I mean, I would do a better job, although I'm not in any way graphics designer. Just see how they're copying and pasting clouds. And for some reason, it is always the polar regions that are masked or hidden or missing from the satellite images. Surely one reason is that historic ruins would show up. Another reason is obscuring the details of what is actually going on. There nowadays a lot is going on. There could be other reasons that I'm not exactly aware of. For example, other races inhabiting. Most likely this big noise over the flat earth theory has been initiated by the party of NASA or the party governing NASA itself to create confusion and to blur the truth, because after all it doesn't make any difference is the earth flat or round or shaped like a pear or like a bottle. The important is that we have no way to finding out on what kind of planet do we live. We are being distracted with this type of paintings instead of actual images. Just see how carefully and selectively areas are being blurred. Do you see the wavy boundaries of this blurred area? This is not overlapping of another satellite image, because satellite images have sharp and perfectly straight corners and edges. And because shallow waters are a very good place to spot old ruins, if they were on the shore they would be dismantled or destroyed easily already. No chances are taken, and with a thick and non-transparent brush manually they obliterate shallow water images. Dear believers that there are no images, look at this. There are images, obviously. They're just spoiled on purpose. And to make it even more difficult to see, whatever tiny remnants of information from the ocean bottom radars they have published, they put this nasty water on the top. Do you see the moving white yellowish stuff? These are not natural waves. This is their beautiful water that you cannot even disable, strangely enough. You should be able to. This is a genuine example of poorly overlapping actual satellite images, just showing you to understand that this is different from their photoshopping on the top of the real images. And that some map providers have the ocean bottom in such dark colors that you can't see anything anyway. This is not a photograph, this is anyway a computer generated, or it is supposed to be computer generated image from the results of the scanning of the ocean bottoms. So colors are attached by the computer. If they were making it really with educational purpose, then why not use colors and contrasts that are actually visible for human eye? Just look at this monstrous distortion of the image. This is just crazy. Just have a look at the different artistic brushes and textures that they are adding to the images to make them useless for a really educational purpose. Actually, by finding the most heavily edited spots on the globe, we can get clues where to search for ruins of the old civilizations. The Canadian lake from the previous episodes is an excellent example of that. And this is how well you can see underwater when the weather is peaceful, and this is the reason for which they blur all the water. No chances are taken. A big map tends to keep the older images that are closer to the original ocean bottom scan longer, and that's why sometimes I try to use them, but they are too dark. So to see what is actually on their images, I need to make a copy of them, a video or photographs, then take them through image editing program, and then they become usable and visible. And then the different map providers at the same time give different images for the same region, and you wonder, are these some sort of real images, or some kid is playing with Photoshop and they're posting it as a scientific work? If this Nordic Hyperborean region was supporting a large population a few hundred or even a few thousand years ago, then the full place should have been full of ruins and artifacts of some sort. But this does not appear to be the case, especially in Russia where people are already doing on-field work. They see definitely, yes, there are intelligently made megaliths, but they're in such a poor condition. And where is all the other stuff, all the artifacts? They really disappear like that in such quantity? Well, if a lot of stuff simply disappeared, I may have some idea how this might have happened. Again, this is only a hypothesis still. I was extremely impressed by those peculiar earth formations, erosion or something, as if a gigantic metal brush scraped the earth. And then I found these strange marks, as if a gigantic bulldozer with a shovel of more than 1 kilometer wide scraped off the surface of the earth. Well, no wonder. Where is all the architecture gone, together with the people and the artifacts? Of course, it doesn't have to be necessarily a bulldozer, but it looks like a mechanical intervention of some sort rather than erosion marks. And yet this appears to be another parallel with the Siberian Hyperborea. Over there as well, we saw very similar picture, independently discovered by somebody else. And the rectangular ponds are also very confusing to me. I can't imagine them having connection to any natural geological process, especially looking at their different sizes, and also sometimes they come in different forms, G forms or other complex forms, again made out of rectangulars. But the strangest is, look here, they overlap each other, so they shouldn't have been swimming pools or like ponds for growing rice or something like that. Really very confusing. Some of them could have been indeed ponds, swimming pools or rice fields, but others could have been connected with the mechanical destruction pattern. Anything is possible. But this is just the beginning of the parallels between the Siberian Hyperborea and the American Hyperborea. A viewer, Mr. Novosod, sent me really an amazing research. He made a major contribution to the Survivor series with these images. This is the Washington Monument, and it appears to be built actually on an older megalithic basis, eroded one. On this second photograph you can see that the material is quite different, the new one and the older one. Probably the eroded parts needed to be reinforced. Well, after seeing this, I no longer ask myself where did the megalithic stones appear on Brighton Beach. Well, they were the rest of the megalithic architecture, because it's not that just one monument and that's the full civilization and that's everything. Of course, there is more to it. Some of the most magnificent buildings in New York, like the Penn Station, were simply torn down, demolished. Probably somebody simply could not bear the sight of the magnificent angels. They had to be substituted with this type of fellows. And then the official history of the events that took place on 25th of August 1814 in Washington is extremely fishy. They're telling us how the British soldiers were putting the city on fire and did not even notice that storm is brewing. Of course, these people come from London. It's such a dry desert there, it hasn't rained in 700 years. Poor Brits! Since they didn't know how a rain cloud looks like, a fierce storm was upon them and they didn't know what's happening. The British cannons were tossed by the winds. Well, those winds were serious if they were tossing cannons, and apparently mighty buildings like these ones were falling on the heads of the British, but killed only a couple of them. Of course, everybody knows the Brits live in the desert and they have 9 lives each. All this event left the city buried in mud. The White House was buried in mud until the 2nd floor. Well, all this sounds familiar. A survivor-style city buried in mud, but only the city, and not the full state, let's say, because to have a few meters of mud, I mean, 2 stories, that's 5 meters high or even more. That is a really great flood magnitude event. And it's so similar to the Moscow story. Again, we have a battle, and exactly on the day of the battle, some always natural thing happens. And again, yet another survivor-style city is buried under mud. And other strange events for which we are also given natural explanations that sound very, very silly. The fire of Peshtido left a really nuclear-scale devastation behind itself. 5 tornadoes killed thousands and jumped over bodies of water. People jumped into lakes to save themselves and were boiled alive there. Historians assure us that it's all because of severe drafts. How can that throw fire tornadoes that tossed away heavy trains? Hundreds of meters away they moved them. And the most suspicious of all is the confidence of the so-called historians who are speaking such nonsense and behave as if everything is okay. Ah yes, if they were saying this is really strange, we have no clue, then I would respect them. And on the very same day, the Great Fire of Chicago occurred, leaving much of the city devastated. Or the New England's Black Day. Almost through the full day it was pitch dark as if it is midnight, and people had no clue what's happening. Now they blame it on some sort of forest fires. Yes, after decades, when the people who knew there were no fires are all gone. I mean, when you have such dense smoke from fires, you would feel the smoke. It is entirely possible that in all these cases, actually weapons were used against us. And what are these 2 Slavic figures doing over there in New York? Every detail of their outfit is precisely Slavic traditional, even in the small details. Now, some say that even the US Capitol building is built on a much older and stronger base. They say that the time when it was officially constructed, in reality, it was only modified and expanded. I don't know if that's true, but the important point is that there were additions later on. And regardless of how much older is the older part, the interesting thing is that the additions constantly need a repair, while the older parts are of much better quality, they are much stronger. Very strange in this age where we are supposedly evolving technologically. I also find very interesting the photographs of the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago in year 1893. Now, according to official history, all these Roman gods that you see at prominent places here are simply props and people are imitating some old culture that they don't belong to. I don't know, to place such gigantic statues of gods that are not your own just because of architectural fashion. Well, I don't believe that so much. Most probably they were still connected to the culture of the survivors. If you remember, in the episode about the swastika, they even used it as a symbol still in these times. The symbol with its original meaning, not the perverted meaning that we have nowadays. Probably at this point you wonder how could have been there any connection. What I'm showing from Hyperborea in the north, the American Hyperborea, is basically one very long wall and strange formations. That is kind of not enough. Well, if there was any Hyperborea in the north, its traces would have been obliterated during the Reformation War in America. I think calling it a Reformation War is much more realistic than colonial conquest, because it was the same party from Europe. It came with same means, cruelty, murders, obliterating history, same story. And in the Americas, this Reformation War was particularly genocidal. Most of the tribes were simply obliterated. And of course, after that, you can compose whatever history you wish. They have no descendants to testify the opposite. Ruins are also not much of a problem. When needed, few meters of mud just come there by chance, and everything is settled. It is also possible that what I try to call Hyperborean Nordic American ruins belong to older civilizations, and the destruction took place much earlier. Everything is possible. Usually the destruction happens in stages. It even continues nowadays. All these historic sites that are being bombed, well, it's all by chance, I guess. So the official picture by the mass media is that all these satellites, this is unofficial information by the way, it is supposed to be a real one. All these dots are various satellites and other equipment that we have launched, for which we have paid billions, hundreds of billions of any currency you choose. With all this money we could have eliminated, for example, hunger and poverty, but no, we paid them to get this type of images. Well, below this video you can see thousands of comments of people who can simply see that this is computer generated graphics. These are not real images. Just notice how many dislikes this video has. I'm not even gonna go into all the details. People are posting really a lot on this. I think this image by itself is enough of proof. If NASA is shameless enough to publish poorly made graphic as actual space image of Earth, and many of them are poorly generated graphics are this, then I think all of its images cannot be trusted at all. So if they are saving even on graphic designers and are hiring cheap labor to do their fake images, then the question comes, what happens to all these hundreds of billions? I cannot give you full details, but I will give you an extremely valuable clue, and it is valuable because it comes from a very reliable source. The source is Vanga, Baba Vanga. She was a prophet of biblical magnitude, and she lived among us just a couple of decades ago. So she was alive when the moon landing took place, and this is what she said about it, because immediately after that people started wondering, did it really take place or not? She said that she watched the astronauts land very carefully. They saw really a lot of stuff on the moon. It was extremely interesting. But nothing of that, none of that information reached the ordinary people. Instead, they were given false landing, fabricated pictures. It is extremely positive development that lately people start noticing a lot of fake footage from various space missions and so on. And this will gradually raise the awareness that all these billions of dollars or euros are being used for something else. So at this point, people are starting to discover a minor low-level details of the grand fraud, and led by curiosity, further on they will reach to the bottom and understand why are we being placed in this weird matrix, artificial matrix. The reason is to force us use the immense creative power of our soul to manifest our reality with the force of our thoughts in a line that we would not do normally. And since the topic today is Hyperborean, did you know that in 2012 Google had a Hyperborean update? It not only changed the last version, but also the older versions were substituted with the newer one, and the date was also changed on them. In other words, they made it look like as if the older version never existed and removed all traces of it. But luckily, some users of the software program called SAS Planet kept on their computers locally saved copies of the older version. So on the left hand side you can see the older version, and on the right hand side the modern one that you can see on Google Earth or Google Maps even now. Well, see for yourself, the left one looks so much more natural. How can you imagine that the ocean floor is just so perfectly leveled? And interestingly enough, mostly the structures underwater that appear to have intelligent design in the Hyperborean region were the ones mostly affected by this update. And other stuff on the world map makes me wonder. This is between South and North America, and this is between South America and Antarctica. Well, they seem pretty similar. Beautiful necklace. And then the straight lines, as if bulldozers made those necklaces. Strange. It will be really interesting to know what the Eskimos and other native people of the northern parts of North America think about the history of the region. Was it inhabited before them? If any viewers of this video hail from this region, I would appreciate a short note about this. I would also appreciate a very short note about other possible scenarios and hypotheses that would make sense of all the facts that I showed in this video about the origin of Hyperborea. I mentioned short messages only because at this point the mail I'm getting has reached such a volume that unfortunately I cannot read anymore, what to speak of responding to the longer messages I get. I'm also getting tons of links to various resources every day. It's out of a question to read even a third of them, what to speak of everything. So if you're sending me a link to a video that is longer than 10 minutes or an article that is longer than, let's say, a normal A4 page, then please include a summary of the most interesting facts that are included in those videos and are not mentioned in the Survivor series. It means stuff that is only new for me. Then I will be able to click and actually view your resource. Otherwise I leave them for later on. So if somebody is aware of any real satellite images of the full Earth, all of the polar regions, please let me know that. But also explain why are they real. Just because it says that they are real by some official agency no longer means anything after all the fake stuff they have published. Also, sincere thank you to all those of you who have sent me a donation. I have tried to write a thank you letter to each and everyone. If I have missed somebody, it means the email got lost or something like that. But in any case, with those donations, yesterday I actually purchased a professional microphone. Won't get delivered very soon, but I hope it will. I hope that will improve finally the audio quality about which so many have been complaining. What do we know about Turkey? Usually people will know that it has some very fine resorts and some antique cities on the west coast. And no wonder that is that's the place where most of the tourists go.
Others who take interest in history may know about a few powerful empires that existed on the territory of current Turkey, the most famous of which are the Hittites, mentioned even by Egyptian pharaohs as equals to them and their brothers. Practically, the whole known antique world was divided between these three very powerful ancient empires, the Assyrians, the Hittites, and the Egyptians. The empire of the Hittites flourished some 3,000 years ago, about 3,000 years ago. Before that, the historians assure us in the textbooks that there were no really interesting or meaningful kingdoms anywhere on the territory of Turkey before that. Andrei Sklarov, the Russian researcher and leader of our expedition, tells us that they went to Turkey in a completely different way, so to say, than their visits to the other countries. Usually they would know at which particular locations they would go in the other expedition, which archaeological sites they would explore, and what to expect more or less. However, in Turkey it was completely different. They had no idea where exactly are they going, and even many people were discouraging them and telling them that it will be completely in vain. I mean, there were only Hittites and simply totally primitive cultures before that. There would be no reason to go and look for some older, more advanced civilizations and artifacts remaining from them in Turkey. But Turkey was such a big and good surprise for their research. They went in a famous temple that supposedly was built by the Hittites, and immediately they found traces of ancient stone saws, marks of those saws on stones. One of the reasons they decided to go to Turkey anyway was that the statue in Mykenæ, a piece of stone artwork that was below the gate in this famous place in Mykenæ. They suggested it didn't belong originally to this place. It was added from somewhere else. So they suggested that it might have been brought from Turkey, which is in the vicinity. Particular statue of two lions, it had traces of machine work. And the other reason they decided anyway to go to Turkey is that it's considered the birthplace of metallurgy. According to the ancient legends, the metallurgy was a gift to humanity given by the gods. The reason for which they decided to visit it is that Turkey, at least part of it, is in one of the original regions which was most favorable for developing agriculture in most ancient times. On the very first day, they arrived in Hattusa. Hattusa, or also called Hattusha, is just enormous. It's, tens of kilometers. To reach from one side of the complex to the other, one definitely needs a car. And it's practically the biggest archaeological site, which is supposed to be built originally by the Hittites. Initially, the research team walked in the area for about 20 minutes, and it really started looking like a very huge complex, but not special in terms of any technology used. It really looked like it could have been done by hand. If you had enough big group of men, it would be completely possible to build it. And as they were about to pass on, all of a sudden they noticed a stone that is very much different from all others. First of all, it was the only basalt stone in the vicinity. Immediately they could notice absolutely clear and unmistakable traces of machine work on this stone. Um, in the beginning, they noticed that some of the surfaces were perfectly polished. There are also traces from marks left by a saw. Polishing on it was so perfect that when it was new, this stone would have been almost of mirror quality. One could even see maybe one's own reflection in it. It was clearly visible that this stone was part of the base of the structure, and it has been underground for quite a long time. There are no manual tools which can produce such perfectly polished surfaces. It is simply not possible to do it without mechanical equipment. On one of the sides were clearly visible the traces of a disc saw, and moreover, this time, unlike some other places in Egypt, the markings they were parallel to the round. If you remember, they saw very similar traces in Egypt. I mean, carved cuttings, but the markings were in the opposite direction. They measured the round trace of the disc and calculated its diameter. It must have been somewhere between 1 meter and 60 and 1 meter and 80 centimeters. Yes, our civilization with our current technology, we do have this type of discs with a diameter of about 2 meters. However, these are not portable tools that we can bring to a construction site. Such tools are only found in huge plants for stonework. However, currently we don't have such type of technology ourselves that would allow us to manufacture similar tools that would be portable because they require a lot of energy, and we simply cannot make it portable at this stage. They noticed also another difference between the ancient tools and the tools that we have at our current disposal. And the difference is that our tools, they cut only with their edge, where there are a kind of diamond material, because that is hard and can cut the stone. While it's clear that with the ancient tool worked not only with its edge, but also with its side. It was cutting and polishing on the sides at the same time. We cannot make such things nowadays. We don't have materials that could withstand this type of pressure. They also noticed some trends that were visible in Egypt as well, and that is that the ancient tools were much, much thinner than our tools. I mean, we see here traces of a cutting saw, marks that are just 2 millimeters wide, and you saw a minute ago how thick are the cutting discs in the stone factories that we use. I mean, those are a few centimeters in thickness. We're still very far from making such thin tools that could cut stone. So it is really a great mystery. How was it possible? I mean, their tools were much thinner than ours, and yet they could withstand much, much more pressure and workload than our tools, and on the top do few operations together, like cutting and polishing together. Now you can see a few various marks again left by that ancient tools on the stone. It It was interesting that there were really a lot of markings left by various tools on a single stone. It seems as if they were placing other stones near it, maybe to support them, and they were working on them probably, or they were like testing their tools before working, or were they just playing, or it was kind of interesting. Since this stone doesn't match with any other stones in the complex, it is kind of obvious that it didn't have much to do with the Hittites. Probably the complex was built around or on the basis of some structure or just at least pieces of something made by a much earlier civilization. They didn't find much more traces of machine tools in any other parts of the complex except for one other stone which also had cutting marks. But Andrei Sklarov was also a bit impressed by the way some stones were laid in this particular part of the complex. Although the second stone with cutting marks was not that impressive, still it was clearly visible, kind of a miniature small step with a height of 1 or 2 centimeters, and there was no doubt that these are marks of machine work again. Pay attention how this couple of stones fit with each other in a way very similar. The stones are laid in Cusco, for example, in Peru. It's a very difficult to make fitting because the surface between the two blocks is really a three-dimensional surface, and they perfectly fit with each other all along this curved surface. This is very difficult to make actually. I mean, to replicate the very same surface on two blocks and such a complex surface, and then make them fit absolutely perfectly so that you cannot even fit a sheet of paper in between them, this is really not an easy job. All around there were happy groups of tourists, and their guide was telling them how the Hittites made these stones. And yet, if you look in between a few particular stones, you will see perfectly polished surfaces, an effect which is impossible to achieve with primitive tools, the ones that the Hittites had on their disposal. We see another basalt stone actually, which the interested tourists have polished with their own hands by touching him all the time. This is not a machine work. This is really done by hand, by caressing it for many, many years. And even the archaeologists decided that this is one of the central artifacts of the full complex and placed it on a prominent place in in the layout of the complex as they restore it. Actually, the very first stone, the one that had lots of various traces of various tools on it, it's also located in a very central place of the complex. Probably that was like the altar place. There is a hypothesis. What about if the Hittites, they brought it from somewhere and actually worshipped it, because they also noticed that these were achievements of stonework that they cannot do, and they knew that this was a heritage from the gods which were inhabiting our earth in ancient times, and that's why they made it an object of worship, like memorabilia from the gods. Now on to the next interesting stone. It had kind of repair on it in a very strange way, as if it was melted down and some other piece of stone was added to it, or I mean, it really didn't make much sense how it happened after all. Additional piece had traces of stone cutting, technologically advanced stuff. We don't even know if this is like a recent addition or is it since ancient times. It's really hard to say. Very unusual artifact to study. The full team really spent a long time looking and guessing what this could be. But also it was interesting that we currently do not have any tool that could leave exactly such type of markings if they take into consideration the orientation of the cutting marks themselves, as if it was done with some sort of a knife that was cutting the stone. We don't really have knives for cutting stone nowadays. So it seems that after all, the legends are much better corresponding to the reality what we can see on the ground, because according to the legends, the town of Hattusha existed much before the Hittites settled in this area. Actually, the Hittites used it for some time. They were not the original creators, as the historians tell us. And yes, here when we go ourselves, we can see that there are definitely a couple of traces of usage of technologically advanced instruments to work with the stones. And we can definitely say that this was not done by the Hittites. They did not have electric saws or anything of that sort at all. And now let's get on to the next very interesting and again unusual archaeological site, that is Alatçohuyuk. If one watches any sort of a documentary on Alatçohuyuk, usually they would show the gate with the Sphinx, and that would be kind of impressive, and that's how it ends basically. They don't show much more of it. But when the research group actually entered those famous gates with the pair of sphinx on both sides, and right after that, when they had a look at the megalithic structure that was facing the complex, I mean the wall that was behind the sphinxes and was facing the complex itself, the full team was actually they were absolutely amazed and shocked. They wouldn't expect even to find such a thing at all. What they saw was exactly the way the stones were laid next to each other was precisely the way it was done in Peru, in the various megalithic structures like the ones found in Cusco and other places. Parallel with the Peruvian way of constructing walls was just to unimaginable degree. Not only it was all the stones had the same absolutely regular shape, but moreover their front surface was dealt with in absolutely same way. You can see like the small channels, kind of channels inside on around each stone, and moreover even the size of the stones used in both places is absolutely the same. We can conclude that it is absolutely the same style, absolutely the same size, absolutely the same looks, and one of them is in Alacahuyuk in Turkey, and the other one is in Cusco in Peru. And at some places where the frequent earthquakes have moved some of the stones a bit on the side, again we can notice that in Turkey as well, the stones fit perfectly with each other, not only on the face of the wall, but all the way in on this intricate surface, the three-dimensional surface between them. And back to the Hittite story, this particular wall has nothing to do with the building style of the Hittites. I mean, the Hittites were building using mortar and soft stone, very small, uneven pieces of stone. Basically, the structures that surely belong to the Hittites, and it is well researched, and it is confirmed that they were indeed built by the Hittites. They look completely different. Those are really primitive buildings that a big group of men could easily put together without much building knowledge, basically. Any logic to imagine that all of a sudden the Hittite builders, stonemasons, they learned how to do this complex and very difficult work of matching complex surfaces of stone, and started doing it with very, very hard basalt stones? It doesn't fit any logic at all. The thing that we can notice that is within some of the Hittite buildings, we can see individual stones used within the Hittite structure, but as if out of place. If we examine them carefully, we can see that once upon a time they were part of like Cusco-like building style walls. However, they were not on their original places, and they were only used as a building material by the Hittites. Judging from the looks of some complexes that are not yet restored by the archaeologists, it seems that these pieces of very ancient structures, they have been laying around already in total disarray, scattered together without without any order. And it seems that they were laying around in that way when the Hittites were building their structures as well. So it seems that Hittites found something that was already ruins. Most likely the Hittites knew that these were remains from the times of the gods, or if they didn't know, they would interpret it in that way, because they could obviously see that such type of construction is far beyond their own capabilities. That is why we see very old stones placed chaotically in various ways on various places within the walls of the Hittite buildings. They are a completely different type of rock, and also by the way they were cut, it's obvious that they did not belong there originally. Yet on the other side of the complex, they find the full area where there are lots of those old blocks. And let's see what is the overall situation. There is a kind of a small miniature valley and on one side of the valley is that well-preserved wall that looks like a Peruvian work, and on the opposite side of the valley there are remains of this maybe a small uh, building made of these stones. After careful examination, they noticed that as if the stones were thrown away from one center, as if there was a huge explosion at one point that destroyed these structures and kind of shifted some of the stones away. Definitely, one of the hypotheses here is that this location was bombed. This could have been the been part of the events by the so-called war between the gods, which is depicted in the midst of various cultures all around the world. They have different names for the gods, but the events are very, very similar. I mean, the very amount of chaotically scattered stones at this location really makes one think that there could have been an ancient, absolutely huge and enormous explosion here. I found a very similar situation in some locations in South America, and it seems that at that location, the structures of the losers party in the war was bombed, and they left it in that way, in total disarray and chaos. And we see the same thing happening here. Like Peru, we don't see any attempts of ancient restoration of the original structure. Hittites, they couldn't work with such big stones, and the best they could do is sometimes drag some of them and insert them in their walls as a building material. It seems that the gods from the Anatolia, Turkey, and the gods from Peru were on the same side in this war. Another thing that we may notice, the Hittites had a very nicely organized society. They were kind of a bit democratic, and also they didn't believe in punishment, in physical punishment, unlike many other cultures of that time. So it seems that they have some sort of cultural heritage. Maybe there was some cultural link between the times of the gods and the Hittites. And that is how they acquired such unusual for the other cultures of that time elements in their law and other spheres of their life. The next destination is the Mount of Nimrod Dar, and the official version is that maybe there was some sort of burial hill over there that was later on covered with stones, and it was an earlier structure, but some sort of tribal leader made his burial chambers there and made statues and placed them in front of the entry of that hill. And all this would have happened, according to the historians, during the reign of Alexander the Great. However, during those times, the influential people would do completely different burials for themselves. They would have ornate statues and writing in great detail about who is buried and their story, and so many other things. The burials of this time look completely different. Another rumor, historic rumor, is that this is some sort of place connected to human sacrifices. But why and how somebody decided to transport uh, so much rubble, I mean small stones, uh, and pile them up and practically make a hill which is 50 meters high, just to cover something with it because there have been human sacrifices in it? That is the rumor. So it really doesn't make much sense. This is a lot of work to transport that much of a rubble manually to just cover something up. We are told by the archaeologists that there had been 4 unsuccessful attempts to go to do some excavations in the hill and go inside and see what it is really inside. But because the small stones were falling on their heads, they decided to give up. This also doesn't make much logical sense. Turkey is a very modern country. They're fantastic tunnel builders. It's not at all for them a technological challenge to penetrate a hill that is just 50 meters high. So really the conclusion about this structure is that it is really very much a mystery and we don't know at all what is it. The next stop in our expedition is Alalak, which is dated by the historians to the first dynasties of the Hittites, or the beginning of their rule. I'm not sure if they have dynasties, sorry about that. And although it has never been a capital or anything like that, it seems to be quite a big complex. And the reason given for that is that it's near the border with Syria, which was an important power at that time. Sorry. After making few rounds in the archaeological complex, the team decided that they're simply not going to find anything interesting connected with ancient advanced technologies anywhere around here, because there were the usual primitive things like small stones put together with some clay. But then things changed. Their guide, local guide, told them, "Come, I will show you a stone." So they decided to follow him and to see what is the stone he wants to show them, and it was absolutely amazing. First of all, they really made sure that this is really an old stone and is not some recent addition or some place where the archaeologists nowadays are, I don't know, testing their tools or something like that. Again, we see a very familiar situation. This single stone is of completely different um, material than anything around there, anything else. And again, it really looked like some sort of working surface where somebody would try tools. There were traces of various tools all around the stone, in various shapes and forms and all kinds of lines in all directions. As if somebody wanted to make a joke and brought this piece from some modern factory for stoneworking. After a careful examination of the marks left by the tools on the stone, the conclusion is that there are no portable tools that could have left this type of marks. Again, if this is done nowadays, it must have been transported from some sort of stone manufacturing facility to this site. In case these marks were done in the antiquity, this definitely is not the work of the Hittites, and has the origin of this stone is not in this merchant city of the Hittites, but much earlier than that. So if this is an ancient artifact indeed, it seems that after all the Hittites did not establish their city on a field, but on the base of something that was already there from even older times. After having a careful look at some of the marks, they notice that there is a curve. So this particular mark must have been left by a disc saw. Then a guide comes and tells them, why are you so interested with this stone? This is a modern stone, this is not an old stone. So the local archaeologists, which were showing them around and told them that this is a new stone, he kind of seemed not very pleased with the fact that some foreigners come and immediately find this, and why are they looking exactly at this stone, as if the Russian group was not supposed to look at this stone for some reason. After that, this archaeologist who told them that this is a new stone, after that he said that he was joking, and he said that this is actually an old stone, it's not new, but the cuttings were made in recent days so that they can take some samples away from this particular stone. But if this was the truth, then the question arises, what kind of tools did they use here on the spot to make these marks? We don't have such tools nowadays. I mean, we don't have portable tools that could leave such markings. Such markings could be left only by machinery found in the factory. Also, this version seems to be questionable because, I mean, what kind of samples were they taking? Just to look at the cuts, it didn't seem as they were cutting something small away. The version of the local archaeologist really doesn't make sense from any side. If somebody wanted to take a sample from this block, they would just take a hammer and a chisel and take a small part of it. That's the easiest way to do it, and not bring some absolutely super fantastic, super modern equipment that doesn't exist anyway. And one more reason that this is absolutely a hilarious idea is that I mean, what would they need a sample from? It's a basalt stone. What will it test it for? There are basalts everywhere. Why would they do that? It simply doesn't make any sense. Let's assume that they wanted to test this particular stone, not because it's a basalt. But why would this particular stone be interesting unless there were cuts on it before? Anyway, if it was a ordinary rock before that, why would they want to test it? It really doesn't make sense. So this mysterious piece of rock, this stone really doesn't match its surroundings. The Hittite complex around it fully matches what we read in the history book in terms of how it has been made, what kind of tools the Hittites had at their disposal. Everything matches perfectly with the history of the textbooks except this particular stone. The most likely scenario, according to the Russian group, is like this. The excavations on this particular archaeological site are only since 2 years. There had been 2 seasons with two different archaeological groups. So the first one found it and couldn't make any sense of it, so just put it on the side and didn't do anything with it because it didn't match with anything around. And then when the second group came, they didn't know anything about it and decided that it is cut in this way because the first group must have been taking some samples from it, right? And that's how nobody knows actually anything about it. The amazing thing actually is that the current historians and current archaeologists, they do not feel attracted by such strange things. They kind of don't have desire to study them. For example, they consider it an importance of great importance if they find some sort of ancient stamp, and that can tell them so many things about the Hittites. But when they find something strange that doesn't match the environment, they rather feel comfortable to simply do nothing with it and leave it just laying around or hide it somewhere. Or the thing is, it is only one stone. There is a version, a hypothesis that exactly like in the churches, they bring from some other places some historical artifacts that belong to supposedly Jesus or supposedly some saint, and consider such objects sacred, and they worship them in this particular church. Maybe the ancient Hittites, they saw the traces of the gods on this stone and brought it here for worship. Maybe this particular building, they call it palace, but it was also some sort of a place of worship, or had some corner for worship. In the medieval history of Christianity, there was some sort of a line of fashion at that time that some churches were not elaborately painted with icons, but the main spotlight was on particular artifacts that would have been brought usually all the way from Asia and would have been considered for some sacred for one reason or another. The destination is Van, the location of Van in eastern Turkey, which wasn't particularly impressive in terms of search of traces of ancient civilization, but there was some sort of tendency that the nearer they got to Iran, the more the handwork was getting more accurate. And there were some places where building blocks were used with very well polished surfaces on the side, but still that was a handwork. It wasn't machine work, because even though fine, there could be seen the traces of the chisels used by the ancient masons. There are a lot of mysteries still waiting to be discovered underneath the earth, especially in eastern Turkey. However, there are hardly any archaeological work going on over there currently because of the political unrest. These are Kurdish regions, and when one visits the modern cities and villages, as if there is some sort of tension in the air. It is as if some sort of bomb can explode at any time. I mean, the bomb of the social unrest. The next stop in our exploration will be the famous Göbekli Tepe. It is a very interesting archaeological site, and it is the only one still which the official, so to say, archaeology accepts to date at about 10,000 years ago. Here, even the official archaeology confesses finally that they really cannot explain and cannot tell us anything about who built it and how built it, how exactly did they build it. But still, they tell us, the archaeologists, you will see even in a few seconds a picture that they have made, how some primitive tribes that were apparently gathering different berries and fruits from the forest around, and were also hunters. All of a sudden they started building these things, and they erected this huge monumental complex, although they had absolutely no knowledge of stone masonry or anything like that at all. They didn't have any tools for stoneworking, but one day they just decided to do it. And not only they decided, but they also did it quite well. So they erected them in the most unusual way. They have, the huge megalithic stones tell us they're put in kind of a base, stone base, and holes were made so that they can kind of put them in the holes. Another interesting detail is that the ornaments that are carved on these stelas are very much in the style that we currently see in not currently, but we see on the ancient structures of Peru and Bolivia. Ornaments are practically the same. The strange things don't end here. Um, we see various animals depicted with actually quite good detail on the stelas, and there are animals like ostriches and few others that are not typical for the local animals that would live in this region of Turkey at those times. How did the people who built Göbekli Tepe know about these animals, and not only know about them, but as if they saw them in the front of their eyes when they were carving them? The details are so well done. The animals that are depicted in the stone carvings of Göbekli Tepe are usually animals that live in regions of lush vegetation and regions of a lot of rainfall and high humidity. And the climate of Turkey is, in this region and in general, is actually quite dry. It doesn't support the ecosystem needed for this type of animal life. It's a strange animal that looks either like a dinosaur or maybe like the extinct dodo bird. An interesting detail that they noticed is that on the stand where these stelas were inserted, there was a small damage, and you can see the pattern of whatever dinosaurs or these dodo birds. This pattern is going on the damaged surface. So it seems that we have traces some sort of ancient restoration work, or maybe the pattern was placed on something that was already ancient at that time and damaged before that. Maybe it was something else before that. There is another dinosaur carving, a kind of dinosaur, and the head of that animal very much resembles the carnivorous dinosaurs seen on the Ica stones. And again, how many times when we are in Turkey, we find ourselves again in Peru? So what was this place actually? Um, some people, the first connection they can make in their minds when they see it is of a kindergarten, because our kindergartens have images of animals on the walls for educational purpose. Other people associate it with a genetic laboratory for designing various animals. So the results were carved on the wall. Why not? Something else interesting about this full complex is that it was buried in, it was covered with earth. I mean, somebody piled up an enormous amount of earth on it to guard it from something or for some other unknown reason. We have, for example, in Mexico, in Teotihuacan, it was also buried. The full complex was buried with earth on the top. By the way, this requires an enormous endeavor to transport such large amounts of soil and pile it up over there. So what if it wasn't the people who covered it up with earth? What if that was done by the currents of the flood, of the famous flood that happened around, 12,000 years ago. I mean, in this case, even the official historians date this monument at about that time. Also, we read in the historic records that it was the complex was covered with sand. However, when the team arrived on the spot, they quickly found out that it wasn't sand at all. It was a mixture of clay and all kinds of stones and all kinds of things inside, actually. And this mixture that covered the full complex. It perfectly matches what would have been carried to this location by uh, gigantic flood, very strong flood current. That's exactly what this type of currents drag and deposit. Moreover, these stones tell us they were also carried away by this flood, probably, because they were not standing. Even the ones that are standing today for display, they're doing that with the help of recent supports. Because the location of the complex is in reality between two hills, when this violent current passed by dragging all that material with it, the deposits were enough to completely cover the complex that was situated in the dell between the two hills.
Eye malisajo, malisajo. Bafula be malisajo, dali mambete.
I would have never imagined that still, even now, one can drive just an hour away from Rome and find himself in a pitch dark ancient tomb, literally walking on pieces of dozens of broken sarcophaguses. Or that in a densely populated area of Europe, in the woods, there are still stone dwellings that look absolutely as if taken out from a fairy tale, as if the elves were surveying the area from this window just a couple of years ago. But apparently modern people prefer the feeling of stability that our history is all figured out. Some learned men have studied everything meticulously and have established the history beyond any doubt, and that is why there is no point to go out there in the woods and explore the actual historic sites. Or in the cases when the historic sites are right in front of their eyes, and in many cases in their own backyards, people simply don't seem to bother to check if they correspond to the history that they have been taught in school, because since early childhood we are always programmed to think that this is work only for historians. Sadly, it seems there weren't that many of our real historians after all in the team that was writing the ancient history of Italy, because if there were true historians, they should have noticed the dense network of rock-cut ruins that covers most of the territory of Italy, if not all of it. Particularly overwhelming was the sheer amount of this style of rock-cut ruins. Thousands, probably many thousands of such remains are found all over every patch of land that has been not plowed again and again for agricultural purposes. Thousands of private properties have cellars belonging to these ruins, or they use them as places to store their garden tools, run small businesses, like for example restaurants, and very often they are used as garages. These garages that you see on the left-hand side are actually converted premises inherited from the old civilization. And this is not a single isolated case, it's a very common sight over large parts of Italy. And not only the garages, the entire street is hewn, carved into the solid bedrock by the old civilization. Although the amount of such ruins is simply not discussed by the mainstream so-called historians, its actual existence is not denied as such. The way in which these ruins are misrepresented to the people is they show a single photograph, for example like this one, and then we are told that the Etruscans or some unknown Bronze Age tribe carved it into the rock, preferably as a necropolis. And always forgetting to mention that this door belongs to a vast complex of multi-storied dwellings and tunnels that were adorned with graceful art and which, for some unknown mystical reason, nobody wants to excavate nowadays. In some cases, after digging a little bit, they even buried the ruins back. And as they are telling you the story of primitive, barely human tribes digging all this into the solid bedrock, they always forget to mention small details, like for example,
long chambers of uniform design, as if made to park a train inside, so long. Even during a very short expedition like ours, we managed to see more train parking size chambers than we can count, along with assembly size halls. On the walls of this particular so-called assembly hall, there was an additional layer of wall decoration that would have rivaled its modern alternatives in terms of looks, and in addition has already proven that it definitely surpasses them vastly in terms of durability. And when they are telling you the stories of all those primitive tribes building all this, they always forget to mention the extent of the network of the rock-cut roads, or at least they look like roads to us. This is thousands of kilometers of roads. It is absolutely impossible to guess their actual extent, because all of these ruins are barely excavated. But the overall impression that I've been getting is that their density is at least as much as that of the modern Italian roadwork system. According to mainstream so-called history, this roadwork was dug out in Etruscan times, when the population of Italy, again, that's part of the mainstream historic wisdom, sheer jewel of it, was about 200,000 people, which means less than one person per square kilometer. Now, if these are roads at all, the people who built them must have had a radically different idea of what road is than us. In modern times, we also sometimes dig through solid bedrock, but that is only to avoid obstacles. For example, we make a tunnel to avoid steep slopes or something of that sort. But here the concept of these ancient roads is completely different. The full thing is dug into the solid bedrock even when the terrain is perfectly flat. It's like digging thousands of kilometers of opened tunnels. This is a really large amount of work. The leftovers of the digging are also nowhere to be seen around, which seems to be the standard situation, by the way, with all the similar sites, which are actually found in many countries over the span of a couple of continents. I find it hard to even comprehend the epic scale of digging that was going on in those times. Initially, the depth of the roads was, let's say, some 5 or 6 meters, but as we were traveling further north, it seems that even the average depth would be like 10 meters, sometimes reaching over 15 or even over 20 meters of depth. All these ruins in Italy pose some very deep and important questions regarding the full world history and how it is being interpreted in the schools nowadays. Questions like, for example, why the mainstream historians pretend so stubbornly that they don't notice that these ruins belong to various periods and most probably couple of groups of cultures. That is not at all difficult to notice. For example, we saw very old roads with tracks and everything, no doubt that it is a road, and literally in the middle of it there is a opening. Somebody has dug what is officially supposed to be an Etruscan necropolis, and this necropolis, or whatever it is, also looks much younger. It is much less eroded. So they always like to associate all the rock-cut ruins in the region with the name of the Etruscans, but in reality those that bear this particular Etruscan style are very few, and they're newer looking. The majority of ruins is much older and has nothing to do with the Etruscan style of architecture. What else is very suspicious is the total silence regarding the fact that ruins of this style are not peculiar to Italy. They are found all over from Israel to Portugal, and some of the layers are found on almost all continents, the older layers I mean. And something else equally suspicious and sad I saw with my own eyes. For example, in the Monsters Park of Bumarzo, which provided unfortunately one out of the many practical examples of how cultural heritage is destroyed under the banner of protecting it. So the Mostri Park of Bumarzo is with paid entrance, maintenance and so on, and while the medieval statues are fenced and cannot be touched, they are being cleaned and restored and so on, at the same time statues that should be more valuable and officially should be classified as Etruscan lay abandoned on the pathway, not besides it, but on the pathway, and children were kicking them as I was watching. There is an UNESCO protected historic site at Tarquinia. We are told that it is so fabulous and special and protected because we have original Etruscan paintings in the necropolis, murals. Or at least we are told that they are such. But then why did I see on the walls biblical characters painted in a cartoon style? And how old is this, all of it anyway, all these ruins, roads? On one side they definitely looked pre-flood, the way they were covered with clay, exactly with clay, not with some cultural layers. That made them look pre-flood, amongst few other reasons that I will mention in the full-length documentary.
On the other hand, most of this is carved on a relatively soft stone called tuff, made from volcanic ash.
And still, the tool marks are clearly visible at many places. Sometimes they look even absolutely fresh. That means that the last layers of these sculptures that were digging all this existed in the relatively not so distant past. One of the members of our expedition said very wise words. He said, "I was afraid that after seeing all the sights here in Italy, I will be much more confused and I will know much less." And that's exactly what happened.
up and battered around, been sent up and I've been shot down. You're the best thing that I've ever found. Handle me with care. Reputation's changeable, situation's tolerable, but baby you're adorable. Handle me with care.
I'm so tired of being lonely. I still have some love to give. Won't you show me that you really care?
Everybody's got somebody to lean on. Put your body next to mine and dream on.
I've been fobbed up and I've been fooled, I've been robbed and ridiculed in daycare centers and night schools. Handle me with care. Been stuck in airports, terrorized, sent to meetings, hypnotized, overexposed, commercialized. Handle me with